The gunshot split the evening air like thunder, startling Cordelia Larson from her whittling. Her knife slipped, slicing a thin line across her thumb that welled with crimson. Outside her cabin, hoofbeats pounded the hard, packed earth, growing louder as they approached. Wyoming Territory, 1875, was no place for a woman alone, but Cordelia had little choice after her husband's passing left her with 20 acres and more determination than sense, according to the townsfolk of Redemption Springs. Cordelia wrapped her bleeding thumb in a scrap of cloth and moved toward the window, peering out into the fading daylight. A horse and rider materialized from the dust, a man slumped in the saddle, one arm curled protectively around something small. Behind him, in the distance, more riders appeared on the horizon. "Help!" The voice was ragged, desperate. "Please, madam, I need help." Cordelia grabbed her father's old shotgun from above the door before stepping onto her porch. The man pulled his exhausted horse to a stop, and she could see him clearly now, tall and broad-shouldered despite his hunched posture, with dark hair matted with sweat and dust. Blood stained his shirt along his side. "What business do you have here?" she called, keeping the shotgun visible. "Those men," he gasped, nodding toward the distant riders, "they're after me." "My boy," he shifted, revealing a small child no more than 4 years old clutched against his chest. "Please, they'll kill us both." Cordelia hesitated only a moment. "Get inside, quickly." The man practically fell from his horse, stumbling but keeping a tight hold on his son. Cordelia ushered them in, then ran to the barn to stable the horse. Evidence of visitors would only condemn them all. When she returned, she found the man sitting at her table, his face pale beneath his tan. The little boy sat wide-eyed on his lap, clutching something broken in his small hands. "I'm Preston James," the man said. "This is my son, William," Cordelia nodded, setting down her shotgun but keeping it within reach. "Cordelia Larson." "Now tell me why there are men hunting you across my property, Mr. James." Preston winced as he shifted in his seat. "I witnessed a murder in Dry Creek. Railroad man killed the sheriff when he wouldn't be bought. I was the only one who saw it happen." He stroked his son's hair. "Now they want to make sure I don't testify." The sound of riders passing in the distance made them all freeze. William whimpered, and Cordelia noticed tears welling in the boy's eyes as he looked down at the broken toy in his hands. "Pa," the child whispered, "my horse broke." Preston sighed, his face crumpling with exhaustion and guilt. "I'm sorry, son. It got crushed when we were running." Cordelia knelt before the child, gently taking the splintered wooden horse. It had been lovingly carved with delicate legs and a flowing mane, but now it lay in pieces. The boy's lower lip trembled. "It was from Mama," William said, and Preston closed his eyes briefly in pain. "My wife died of fever last winter," he explained quietly to Cordelia. "That horse was the last thing she made for him." Cordelia studied the broken toy, then the tearful child. "Well now," she said softly, "I might be able to help with this. But first, let's tend to your father's wound." As night fell fully, Cordelia cleaned and bandaged Preston's injury, a bullet graze that had bled profusely but wasn't life-threatening. William had finally fallen asleep on her small bed, exhausted from their journey and the day's trauma. "Those men," Cordelia asked as she worked, "will they keep searching?" Preston nodded grimly. "Until they find us or until the circuit judge arrives in 3 days. If I can testify, it'll be over." "3 days," she echoed, tying off his bandage. Their eyes met in the lamplight, and Cordelia felt something shift inside her, recognition of a good man in terrible circumstances, perhaps, or something more. "I've been running for 2 days straight," Preston said. "William hasn't had a proper meal or rest. I had nowhere else to go." "You'll stay here," Cordelia decided, surprising herself with how easily the words came. "They've already passed by. They won't expect you to be holed up with a widow." Relief washed over Preston's face, followed by wariness. "It's dangerous for you. Everything out here is dangerous, Mr. James." She rose and went to her workbench where her carving tools lay. "Now I have work to do before morning." Through the night, as Preston slept fitfully in her rocking chair, Cordelia worked by lamplight. Her fingers, calloused from years of working the land and crafting from wood, selected a piece of pine from her small collection. Her knife moved deftly, shaving away layers, revealing the form hidden within the grain. She thought of the sleeping child, of his father's desperate flight to save them both, of the broken toy that connected the boy to his departed mother. By the time the first gray light of dawn crept through her window, Cordelia's eyes burned with fatigue, but in her hands she held a new wooden horse, its proportions perfect for small hands, its mane and tail flowing with a grace that suggested movement. She'd even managed to stain it with walnut juice to match the color of the original. The cabin door creaked, and Cordelia looked up to find Preston watching her, his expression unreadable. "You stayed up all night," he said, his voice rough with sleep and something else, wonder perhaps. Cordelia stretched her stiff shoulders. He shouldn't wake to find his horse still broken. Preston crossed to her side, taking the carved horse gently in his hands. His fingers brushed hers, warm and calloused. "This is beautiful work. Better than," he stopped himself. "Different from his mother's, but beautiful. I hope he likes it." A small sound from the bed drew their attention. William was sitting up, rubbing his eyes, looking around the unfamiliar cabin with growing alarm until he spotted his father. "Pa," he called uncertainly. Preston went to him, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm here, son. And look, Miss Larson has something for you." Cordelia approached with the wooden horse, holding it out to the child. William's eyes widened as he reached for it, turning it over in his small hands. "It's not the same as your mama's," Cordelia said gently, "but perhaps it could keep you company until we can fix the other one." The boy looked up at her, then back at the horse. Slowly, he brought it close to his chest. "Thank you, madam," he whispered. Preston's eyes met Cordelia's over his son's head, filled with gratitude that went beyond words. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, a connection forged in crisis and kindness. "Now," Cordelia said briskly, breaking the spell, "who's hungry for breakfast?" As she prepared a simple meal of cornmeal mush and the last of her bacon, Cordelia felt Preston's gaze following her movements. The small cabin, which had felt so empty since her husband's death 2 years prior, now hummed with a peculiar energy that both unsettled and invigorated her. "We shouldn't stay," Preston said as they ate. "Those men could come back, search the outlying properties." "And where would you go?" Cordelia challenged. "Your horse is exhausted, you're injured, and your boy needs rest. The circuit judge arrives in 3 days. Better to hide here than risk being caught in the open." Preston studied her, a slow frown creasing his brow. "Why would you risk yourself for strangers?" Cordelia considered the question, looking from father to son. William was making his new wooden horse trot across the tabletop, lost in his own world of imagination. "Perhaps I'm tired of being alone," she said finally. "Or perhaps I simply know right from wrong. Those men who are hunting you there, the same kind who think they can take whatever they want out here, whether it's land or lives. You've had trouble with them before," Preston guessed. Cordelia nodded, her mouth set in a grim line. "The railroad wants my land for a spur line. My husband and I bought this place fair and square, worked it with our bare hands. When Samuel died, they thought I'd be easily intimidated into selling." Her eyes flashed. They were mistaken. Preston's expression softened with understanding. You're fighting your own battle." "We all are out here," she replied. "Now eat your breakfast before it gets cold." The day passed in tense vigilance. Cordelia went about her chores, feeding her chickens, milking her cow, tending her small vegetable garden as if nothing were amiss, though she kept her shotgun close and her eyes on the horizon. Preston, despite her protests, insisted on helping where his injury allowed. He split kindling for her cook stove, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal sinewy forearms bronzed by the sun. William followed Cordelia like a shadow, clutching his new wooden horse and asking endless questions about her farm. His curiosity was refreshing after so many months of silence. "Do your chickens have names?" he asked as she collected eggs. "Indeed they do," she replied solemnly. "That speckled one is Freckles and the black one is Midnight. The bossy one who pecks the others is the Queen." William giggled, a sound so pure it made Cordelia's heart ache. "And what's the cow's name?" "Buttercup," she said. "Would you like to help me feed her?" By midday, William was thoroughly enchanted with farm life, and Cordelia found herself smiling more than she had in months. Even Preston seemed to relax slightly, though he still tensed at every distant sound. As evening approached, Cordelia was kneading dough for biscuits when she spotted dust on the horizon riders approaching. "Preston," she hissed, nodding toward the window. He was at her side in an instant, his body going rigid as he recognized the threat. "It's them Harker's men." "Take William to the root cellar," Cordelia instructed, wiping flour from her hands. "There's a trapdoor beneath the rug in the bedroom." Preston hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll send them on their way." His hand caught her arm. "Cordelia, they're dangerous men." "So am I," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Now go." After they disappeared, Cordelia straightened her apron and hair, then picked up her shotgun and stepped onto the porch. 4 riders approached, hard-faced men with guns displayed prominently. The leader, a narrow-eyed man with a drooping mustache, reined in his horse. "Afternoon, madam," he said with a tip of his hat that did nothing to disguise the menace in his eyes. "We're looking for a man and a boy who might have passed this way." Cordelia leaned on her shotgun, affecting an air of boredom. "Ain't seen nobody but you lot, and I'd appreciate it if you'd move along. Got chores to finish before dark." The man's eyes narrowed further. "Mind if we have a look around?" "I do mind," Cordelia replied firmly. "This is private property." "We represent the Western Pacific Railroad, madam. We have authority." "You have no authority here," she interrupted. "I know you, Mr. Harker, even if you don't remember me. You tried to bully me off my land last spring. Didn't work then, won't work now." Harker's expression darkened as recognition dawned. "The stubborn widow. Should have known this was your place." He spat on the ground. "Still, we're looking for witnesses to a crime. It gives you nothing," Cordelia said, raising her shotgun slightly. "Now get off my land before I decide you're trespassing with ill intent." The men exchanged glances, measuring her resolve. Finally, Harker shrugged. "Have it your way for now, Mrs. Larson, but we'll be back with more official company." "I'll be waiting," she replied calmly. She stood unwavering as they rode away, not lowering her shotgun until they were specks on the horizon. Only then did her hands begin to shake. Cordelia returned inside and went to the bedroom, pulling back the rug to reveal the trapdoor. "They're gone," she called softly. Preston emerged first, then helped William up. The boy immediately ran to the window to peer out. "Are the bad men coming back?" he asked. "Not right away," Cordelia assured him, though the look she exchanged with Preston conveyed her true concern. "They'll return," Preston said quietly when William went back to playing with his horse. "Probably with the corrupt deputy from Dry Creek, claiming official business." Cordelia nodded, resuming her biscuit-making with hands that refused to be still. "Then we need a plan." That evening, after William had fallen asleep, Cordelia and Preston sat at her table, speaking in hushed tones. The single oil lamp cast long shadows across their faces, highlighting the gravity of their situation. "The circuit judge arrives in Redemption Springs in 2 days," Preston said. "If I can get to him, tell him what I saw, he can issue warrants for Harker and his boss." "But Harker will be watching the roads," Cordelia pointed out, "and the town." Preston ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I can't keep putting you in danger." "William and I should leave tonight, try to reach the next county." "No," Cordelia said decisively. "That's exactly what they expect. They'll be watching for travelers." She thought for a moment. "But they won't be watching for me." "What do you mean?" "I go into town every Saturday for supplies." "Tomorrow's Saturday. I'll go as usual, find the sheriff, tell him what's happening." Preston shook his head. "Too dangerous. What if Harker's men see you talking to the sheriff?" "Sheriff Cooper is a good man. He's no friend to the railroad." Cordelia leaned forward. "He can send a telegram to meet the judge before he arrives, warn him about what's happening." Preston studied her face in the lamplight, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "Why are you doing this? You barely know us." Cordelia's gaze dropped to her hands, work roughened and capable. "When Samuel died, no one helped me. Everyone expected me to fail, to give up this place." She looked back at him, her eyes fierce. "I don't like bullies, Mr. James, railroad men or otherwise." "Preston," he corrected softly. "After all this, I think you should call me Preston." Their eyes held across the table, and Cordelia felt that strange shifting sensation again, like the ground beneath her feet wasn't quite solid. She cleared her throat and stood. "We should get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Morning came all too quickly, dawning bright and clear. Cordelia rose early, dressing in her best though still modest dress for her trip to town. Preston insisted on doing her morning chores despite her protests about his injury. "You've done enough," he said simply. "Let me do this much." William was delighted to help feed the animals, chattering away as he carried a small pail of chicken feed. The wooden horse remained clutched in his other hand, never far from his side. As Cordelia hitched her wagon, Preston approached, his expression serious. "If there's trouble," he said quietly, "don't try to be brave, just get yourself back here safely." Cordelia nodded, touched by his concern. "I'll be careful. Keep William inside just in case Harker sends someone back." Preston reached out suddenly, his hand catching hers. "Cordelia." Her name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Thank you for everything." She squeezed his hand briefly before pulling away. "Thank me when this is over." The journey to Redemption Springs took nearly an hour. The steady clip-clop of her horses, hooves doing little to calm Cordelia's nerves. The town came into view gradually. A collection of wooden buildings stretched along a dusty main street, dominated by the gleaming new railroad station at its far end. Cordelia drove directly to the general store, maintaining her routine. Inside, she greeted Mr. Finch, the proprietor, with her usual polite smile. "Morning, Mrs. Larson. The usual today?" "Yes, please, Mr. Finch, and I'll need some extra coffee if you have it." As the storekeeper gathered her supplies, Cordelia casually asked, "Is Sheriff Cooper about today?" Mr. Finch glanced up, his bushy eyebrows rising slightly. "Got trouble out at your place? Just some questions about hunting licenses," she lied smoothly. "Noticed some men on my property yesterday." "Ah," Mr. Finch nodded. "Sheriff should be in his office." Busy morning, though, railroad men causing a stir. Cordelia's stomach tightened. "Oh, what kind of stir?" "Looking for some fellow and his boy, claiming he's a thief or some such." Mr. Finch snorted. "More likely he wouldn't sell to them. You know how they operate." "Indeed I do," Cordelia murmured. After paying for her supplies and arranging for them to be loaded in her wagon, Cordelia made her way to the sheriff's office. She was nearly there when a familiar voice called her name. "Mrs. Larson." What a pleasant surprise. Cordelia turned to find Theodore Blackwell, the Western Pacific Railroad's regional manager, approaching with his usual oily smile. Behind him stood Harker, and another man she didn't recognize, likely the corrupt deputy from Dry Creek. "Mr. Blackwell," she acknowledged coldly. "I have business elsewhere." Blackwell stepped into her path. "Actually, I've been meaning to speak with you. I have a new offer for your property, quite generous, I might add." "My answer hasn't changed," Cordelia replied. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Blackwell's smile thinned. "Before you go, perhaps you could answer a question. My men visited your property yesterday, looking for fugitives. You claimed not to have seen anyone, but we have reason to believe you might be harboring them." Cordelia kept her expression neutral, though her heart pounded. "Your men were trespassing, Mr. Blackwell. I don't appreciate false accusations on top of that offense." "No accusation, merely a question." Blackwell's eyes hardened. "The man we're seeking witnessed an unfortunate incident and misinterpreted what he saw. He's taken his son and fled, causing his poor wife considerable distress." The lie was so blatant that Cordelia nearly laughed. His wife? How remarkable, considering the poor woman died last winter. Too late, she realized her mistake. Blackwell's expression sharpened with predatory interest. "So you have seen him," he said softly. "How interesting." "I've heard talk in town," Cordelia recovered quickly. "People gossip, Mr. Blackwell. Now, I really must be going." She tried to step around him, but Harker moved to block her path. "I think you'll be coming with us, Mrs. Larson," Blackwell said. "We need to have a more private conversation about your house guests." Cordelia's hand moved toward her pocket where she kept a small derringer for protection, but before she could reach it, a new voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here, Mrs. Larson?" Sheriff Cooper approached, his weathered face set in stern lines. Though not a large man, he carried himself with the quiet authority that had kept Redemption Springs relatively peaceful for 15 years. "No problem, Sheriff," Blackwell said smoothly. "Just a business discussion with Mrs. Larson." "Didn't look like business to me," Cooper observed. "Looked like 3 men intimidating a lady on a public street." He tipped his hat to Cordelia. "You all right, madam?" "I was just coming to see you, Sheriff," Cordelia said, relief flooding her voice. "About those men trespassing on my property yesterday." Cooper's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why don't you come to my office and file a report? Mr. Blackwell, I'm sure you have railroad business to attend to." For a moment, tension crackled in the air like heat lightning. Then Blackwell stepped back with a forced smile. "Of course, Sheriff. We'll continue our discussion another time, Mrs. Larson." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Once safely in the sheriff's office, Cordelia told Cooper everything about Preston and William, about the murder Preston had witnessed, and about Harker's men searching for them. The sheriff listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. When she finished, he sighed heavily. "I've suspected Blackwell's outfit of dirty dealings for months, but haven't been able to prove anything," he said. "A witness to murder that would do it." He leaned back in his chair. "But getting James safely to the judge won't be easy, especially now that Blackwell knows you're involved." "What can we do?" Cordelia asked. Cooper thought for a moment. "Judge Parker arrives tomorrow afternoon on the eastbound train. I'll send a telegram today, warning him about the situation." He fixed Cordelia with a serious look. "But you shouldn't return to your farm. Blackwell's men will surely follow you, or worse, be waiting for you." Cold fear gripped Cordelia's heart. "But Preston and William, I'll send my deputy out the back way through Miller's Pass. He can warn them, bring them to town by a different route. Cooper stood. You'll stay at Mrs. Hollister's boarding house until this is settled. Cordelia shook her head firmly. No, I won't abandon them or my farm. I'm going back. Mrs. Larson, Cordelia, be reasonable. It's too dangerous. Then send your deputy with me, she insisted. We can approach from the north through the woods. They won't expect that. Cooper studied her determined face and finally nodded. All right, but you'll do exactly as Deputy Reed tells you, understand? An hour later, Cordelia and Deputy Reed were making their way through the dense forest that bordered the northern edge of her property. They had left her wagon and horse at the livery stable, taking Reed's horse instead and riding double, following game trails rarely used by humans. We're almost there, Cordelia whispered as they dismounted at the edge of the trees. Her small farmhouse was visible in the distance, looking peaceful in the afternoon sun. Reed scanned the surrounding area with narrowed eyes. I don't see anyone, but that doesn't mean they're not around. He checked his revolver. Stay close behind me. They moved cautiously through the tall grass, approaching the back of the house. No smoke rose from the chimney, and the yard was eerily quiet, no chickens scratching, no sound of chopping wood or other chores. Fear clutched at Cordelia's throat. Had Blackwell's men already found them? They reached the back door, which stood slightly ajar. Reed motioned for Cordelia to stay back as he pushed it open, gun raised. Preston, Cordelia called softly, unable to bear the suspense. William. A tense moment of silence, then a small voice cried out, Miss Cordelia. William burst from the bedroom, his wooden horse clutched to his chest, and threw himself at her legs. Preston followed more cautiously, a rifle in his hands, his face tight with worry until he recognized Reed's badge. Thank God, Preston breathed, lowering his weapon. We heard riders earlier thought you'd been caught. Blackwell knows, Cordelia explained quickly. He guessed I was hiding you when I slipped up in town. She introduced Deputy Reed and explained the sheriff's plan. The judge arrives tomorrow, Reed added. Sheriff Cooper is sending him a telegram today. If we can get you safely to town by tomorrow afternoon, you can testify. Preston nodded grimly. But Blackwell's men will be watching every road, and now they'll be watching for Cordelia too. We need a diversion, Reed said. Something to draw them away from the main roads tomorrow morning. Cordelia moved to the window, gazing out at her small farm, the land she'd fought so hard to keep. An idea began to form in her mind, one that made her heart ache but her resolve strengthen. I know what to do, she said quietly, but you won't like it. Night fell over the farmhouse, bringing with it a tense, waiting silence. William had been put to bed early, though his excitement about the adventure made sleep elusive. Preston and Cordelia sat at her table with Deputy Reed, going over the plan one final time. It's too risky, Preston argued, his face lined with worry. If something goes wrong, it won't, Cordelia insisted. Blackwell wants my land almost as much as he wants you silenced. When he sees the smoke, he'll think I'm destroying what he can't have. His men will come running. And while they're distracted by the burning barn, Reed continued, we'll take the creek trail into town. It's longer but less likely to be watched. Preston shook his head, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't like using you as bait, Cordelia. These men are killers. I won't actually be there, she reminded him. I'll set the fire, then circle back through the woods to meet you. The barn will be empty, no animals will be harmed. Your barn, Preston said softly. Your livelihood. Cordelia's throat tightened with emotion she couldn't afford to show. It's just wood, it can be rebuilt. Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a connection deeper than their brief acquaintance should allow. "Rest," Deputy Reed suggested, breaking the silence. "We leave before dawn." Preston insisted Cordelia take her bed, while he and Reed would keep watch in shifts. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Cordelia as she lay beside the sleeping William, his small body curled around his wooden horse. She thought of her barn, built by her husband's hands and her own, soon to be sacrificed. She thought of Preston's quiet strength, his devotion to his son, the way his eyes softened when they met hers. Morning came too quickly, the gray light of pre-dawn filtering through the curtains. They moved silently, gathering only what was necessary. William, still drowsy, clung to his wooden horse and to Preston's hand. "Remember," Reed instructed, "once you set the fire, ride straight for Miller's Creek. We'll meet you at the bend with the 3 boulders." Cordelia nodded, her face pale but determined. She knelt before William, meeting his solemn eyes. "I'll see you very soon," she promised. "Keep your horse safe." The boy nodded, then surprised her by throwing his arms around her neck. "Be careful of the bad men," he whispered. Preston helped her mount Reed's horse, his hands lingering on her waist. "Cordelia," he began, then faltered. She covered his hand with her own. "I know," she said simply. "Go, keep your boy safe." As they disappeared into the woods, William looking back until the trees swallowed them, Cordelia steeled herself for what came next. She rode to the barn and dismounted, gathering the materials she'd prepared the night before: coal, oil, matches, a few rags. The barn had stood for 10 years, weathering blizzards and drought. Inside were the tools of her survival: her plow, her wagon parts, her winter feed stocks. Memories of working alongside Samuel filled every corner. "Forgive me," she whispered, splashing the coal oil along the outer walls. With a deep breath, she struck a match and touched it to the oil-soaked rags. Flames leapt eagerly to life, catching the dry wood with frightening speed. Cordelia mounted quickly and spurred the horse toward the creek trail, not allowing herself to look back until she was at the edge of her property. From there, she could see the barn fully engulfed, black smoke billowing into the morning sky. Already, distant riders were approaching from the direction of Town Blackwell's men, just as she'd predicted. Cordelia turned her horse toward Miller's Creek, riding hard through the underbrush. The meeting point was 3 miles away, following the winding creek that eventually fed into the larger river near town. Her heart pounded with exertion and fear, imagining William's frightened face if she failed to appear. She was nearly there when a rifle shot cracked through the air, spooking her horse. The animal reared, nearly unseating her, then bolted forward. Cordelia fought for control, ducking low as another shot rang out. "There she is," a voice shouted from behind. "Don't let her reach the creek, Harker." Somehow he had guessed their plan, or perhaps had men watching from all directions. Cordelia urged her mount faster, branches whipping at her face as they crashed through the underbrush. The creek came into view, its waters sparkling in the morning sun. Just beyond the bend, Preston, Reed, and William would be waiting. If she could reach them, another shot closer this time. Her horse screamed and stumbled, throwing Cordelia forward. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. The wounded horse staggered a few more steps before collapsing. Cordelia dragged herself to her feet, ignoring the pain shooting through her side. She could hear hoofbeats approaching rapidly from behind. The creek was just 50 yards away. She began to run. "Stop right there, Mrs. Larson," Harker's voice commanded. Cordelia kept running, her lungs burning, her skirts hampering her stride. Just a little further, the impact of a bullet striking the ground beside her foot sent her sprawling. Before she could rise, Harker was there, dismounting and grabbing her roughly by the arm. "Thought you could outsmart us, didn't you?" he sneered, yanking her to her feet. "Where's James and the boy?" "Gone," Cordelia gasped, struggling against his grip. "You'll never catch them now." Harker backhanded her across the face, splitting her lip. "We'll see about that. Blackwell's waiting for you back at your farm, what's left of it." He began dragging her toward his horse when a shout rang out. "Let her go, Harker." Preston stood at the edge of the creek, rifle raised, with Deputy Reed beside him similarly armed. William was nowhere to be seen, safely hidden, Cordelia prayed. Harker pulled Cordelia against him, using her as a shield. Well, well, the witness himself. How convenient. He drew his pistol, pressing it to Cordelia's temple. "Drop your weapons, or the widow dies right here." Time seemed to slow. Cordelia could see the anguish in Preston's eyes, the calculation in Reed's. She could feel Harker's hot breath on her neck, the cold press of the gun barrel against her skin. "Don't," she called to Preston. "Get William to the judge. That's what matters." "Shut up," Harker growled, tightening his grip. Preston's eyes never left hers, and in them she read a promise he would not abandon her. Slowly he lowered his rifle. "That's right," Harker said smugly. "Now kick it away." As Preston began to comply, Cordelia made her move. She drove her elbow hard into Harker's stomach, then stomped on his instep with all her strength. The gun went off with a deafening crack, but the bullet flew wide as Harker's grip loosened. Preston and Reed fired simultaneously. Harker staggered backward, red blooming across his chest, a look of stunned disbelief on his face before he crumpled to the ground. Cordelia stood frozen, shaking until Preston reached her. Then her legs gave way and she collapsed into his arms. "I thought," she began, but couldn't continue. "I know," Preston murmured, holding her tightly. "I know." Reed checked Harker's body, confirming what they already knew. "We need to move," he said grimly. "There will be others." A small figure darted from the underbrush. William, who had been hiding nearby despite their plans. He threw himself at Cordelia, wrapping his arms around her legs. "You're hurt," he cried, pointing to the blood on her lip. Cordelia knelt, smoothing his hair. "It's just a scratch." "Is your horse safe?" she asked, nodding to the wooden toy still clutched in his hand. William nodded solemnly. "He helped me hide real good." They made it to Redemption Springs by midday, taking a circuitous route that Reed swore wasn't watched. Sheriff Cooper met them at the back entrance to his office, his face grave. "Blackwell's in a rage," he informed them. "Your barn's gone, Mrs. Larson, and he's got men watching the train station for the judge's arrival." "But the judge was warned?" Preston asked anxiously. Cooper nodded. "Received a reply to my telegram this morning. Judge Parker is bringing U.S. Marshals with him on the train. They'll arrest Blackwell the moment he shows his face." Relief washed over Cordelia, making her knees weak. Preston's arm went around her waist, supporting her. "You need rest," he said quietly. "You've been through too much." Cooper directed them to a small room behind his office, normally used for trustees or witnesses needing protection. It contained only a cot, a chair, and a small table, but after the night and morning they'd endured, it seemed like luxury. William curled up on the cot almost immediately, exhaustion claiming him. His wooden horse remained tucked under his arm, a talisman of safety. Preston and Cordelia sat side by side on the floor, backs against the wall, too wired for sleep despite their fatigue. "Your barn," Preston said softly. "I'm so sorry, Cordelia." She shrugged, though the loss still ached. "As I said, it's just wood. I'll rebuild it," he promised. "Once this is over, if you'll let me." Cordelia turned to look at him, studying the earnest lines of his face, the warmth in his eyes. "Why would you do that?" Preston's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Because in 2 days, you've shown more courage and kindness than most people do in a lifetime. Because my son smiles when you're near something he hasn't done since his mother died. He faltered, then continued more softly, because I find myself unable to imagine leaving you behind when this is done. Cordelia's heart stuttered in her chest. You hardly know me. I know enough, Preston replied. I know you stayed up all night to carve a toy for a child you just met. I know you risked your life and your livelihood for strangers. I know that when you look at me, I feel like I've come home after a very long journey. Tears welled in Cordelia's eyes. It's just the danger, she whispered. These feelings, they're born from fear and gratitude, not love, Preston finished. Perhaps, but I'd like the chance to find out once we're safe. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. Would you give me that chance, Cordelia Larson? Before she could answer, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts, running feet, the unmistakable sound of a train whistle in the distance. The eastbound train was arriving, bringing with it Judge Parker and, hopefully, an end to their ordeal. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and testimonies. Judge Parker, a stern-faced man with piercing eyes and an unwavering commitment to justice, listened to Preston's account of the murder he'd witnessed, then to Cordelia's story of their flight and Blackwell's pursuit. U.S. Marshals had indeed accompanied the judge, and they wasted no time arresting Blackwell when he appeared at the station to confront Parker. The railroad man's face had contorted with fury when he spotted Preston standing beside the judge, very much alive and ready to testify. This isn't over, Blackwell had snarled as the marshals led him away. Western Pacific doesn't forget its enemies. Neither does justice, Judge Parker had replied coldly. By nightfall, arrest warrants had been issued for the remaining members of Blackwell's gang. The corrupt deputy from Dry Creek was already in custody, singing like a canary to save his own skin. Sheriff Cooper assured them that with Blackwell facing murder charges, the railroad's grip on the territory would weaken considerably. You're both free to go, he told Preston and Cordelia. Though I'd advise staying in town tonight, just to be safe. Mrs. Hollister's boarding house had a spare room, which she offered to Cordelia at no charge. News of her bravery had spread quickly through the small town. Preston and William took a room at the hotel across the street. After a proper meal and her first hot bath in days, Cordelia stood at the window of her room, gazing at the hotel where Preston and William slept. Tomorrow, they would return to her farm to assess the damage. After that, a soft knock at her door startled her. Mrs. Hollister stood outside, a knowing smile on her face. There's a gentleman asking for you in the parlor, she said. Quite insistent, though I told him it was hardly proper at this hour. Cordelia's heart quickened. Thank you, Mrs. Hollister, I'll come down. Preston waited by the fireplace, hat in hands, his tall figure silhouetted against the flames. He turned at her entrance, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. William, she asked, sound asleep. Mrs. Hollister's daughter is sitting with him. He took a step toward her. I couldn't wait until morning. For what? Cordelia asked, though she already knew for your answer. Preston closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. Will you give us a chance, Cordelia? I know it's sudden. I know there are 1,000 practical reasons to say no, but Cordelia silenced him by rising on tiptoe and pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, almost chaste, but it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Yes, she whispered as she pulled away. Yes, I'll give us a chance. The joy that transformed Preston's face was worth every hardship of the past days. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her slightly as he returned her kiss more thoroughly, pouring into it all the emotions words couldn't express. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Preston rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he said reluctantly, before Mrs. Hollister decides I'm compromising your virtue. Cordelia laughed softly. Too late. I think that ship has sailed. But she stepped back, straightening her skirts. Tomorrow, she promised. We'll figure everything out tomorrow. Morning brought clear skies and a sense of possibility that had been missing from Cordelia's life for too long. She met Preston and William for breakfast, the boy chattering excitedly about returning to the farm to see the chickens again. Sheriff Cooper provided them with a wagon and team for the journey back, as Cordelia's horse had been lost in the escape, and Preston's was still recovering at her farm. As they approached her property, Cordelia steeled herself for the sight of the burned barn. The charred skeleton came into view first, black against the blue sky, but her attention was drawn immediately to something else: her house, intact and undamaged. They didn't burn it, she breathed in relief. Probably planned to claim it after you were gone, Preston said grimly, then squeezed her hand. But you're not going anywhere. The farmyard seemed eerily quiet after the chaos of the previous days. Preston helped Cordelia and William down from the wagon, then went to check on his horse in the small corral behind what remained of the barn. The animal was thin but unharmed, nickering softly in recognition. William ran to greet the chickens, which had returned to their usual scratching despite the upheaval. "Look, Pa," he called. "The Queen remembers me." Cordelia stood surveying the damage, mentally calculating what it would take to rebuild before winter set in. It would be difficult, perhaps impossible, for a woman alone. "It's not as bad as it could be," Preston said, rejoining her. "The structure's gone, but we saved the animals. The tools can be replaced." Cordelia turned to him, a question in her eyes. Preston took her hands, his expression serious. "I meant what I said yesterday. I want to rebuild not just your barn, but a life, here with you if you'll have us." "What about your home?" Cordelia asked. "Your life before all this?" Preston glanced at William, who was solemnly introducing his wooden horse to each chicken in turn. "I was a rancher before Mary died, had a small spread near Dry Creek. But after she passed, I couldn't bear to stay, sold the land, kept just enough to get by." His eyes met hers again. "There's nothing holding us there, but here." He squeezed her hands. "Here I see a future." Cordelia's heart swelled with emotions too complex to name. "It won't be easy," she warned. "This land demands everything you have and then asks for more." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Preston replied. "And I'm not afraid of loving you, Cordelia Larson, even if it's happened faster than either of us expected." William came running up then, tugging at Cordelia's skirt. "Can I help feed the chickens again? And can we fix your barn? Pa says I'm good at hammering." Cordelia knelt to his level, smoothing his tousled hair. "Would you like to stay here with me and your pa, to make this your home?" The boy's eyes widened. "Forever and always." "That's the idea," Preston said, ruffling his son's hair. William considered this seriously, looking from his father to Cordelia, then down at his wooden horse. "Will you teach me to make horses like this?" he asked finally. Cordelia's eyes misted. "I'd be honored to." "Then yes," William decided firmly. "This is home now." Over the following weeks, word spread through Redemption Springs about the widow Larson and the brave witness who had brought down Theodore Blackwell. Neighbors who had kept their distance, intimidated by the railroad's interest in her land, now came forward with offers of help. A barn raising was organized, men from town and surrounding farms arriving with tools and lumber, women bringing food enough to feed an army. In a single day, the frame of the new barn rose on the ashes of the old. Cordelia moved among them, directing, thanking, occasionally wiping away tears when she thought no one was looking. Preston worked alongside the other men, his strength and skill evident in everything he did. William darted about, helping in his earnest way, proudly showing everyone his wooden horse and telling the tale of how Cordelia had made it for him. "He's a good man," Martha Cooper, the sheriff's wife, commented as she and Cordelia laid out the midday meal. "And that boy of his is sweet as sugar." "Yes," Cordelia agreed, watching as Preston lifted William onto his shoulders to hand a tool to a man working on the roof beams. "They both are." Martha's eyes twinkled knowingly. "And when's the wedding to be?" Cordelia blushed. "We haven't, that is, it's still very new." "HMPH," Martha snorted. "Life's too short for dithering, especially out here. When you find something good, you hold on to it with both hands." By October, the new barn stood complete, larger and sturdier than its predecessor. The first snow dusted the distant mountains, a reminder of the winter to come. Preston had moved his belongings into the cabin, though propriety demanded he sleep on a pallet by the fireplace until certain matters were settled. William had taken to farm life with the adaptability of children, treating each day as a new adventure. In the evenings, he would sit at the table while Cordelia taught him the basics of whittling, his small hands carefully guiding the knife under her watchful eye. Preston had found work breaking horses for neighboring ranches, bringing in much-needed income as they prepared for winter. But he always returned by nightfall, unwilling to spend even a single night away from his new family. On a crisp afternoon in late October, as Cordelia gathered the last of her garden's produce, Preston approached with an unusual hesitancy in his step. "I was in town today," he began, helping her with the basket of root vegetables. "Spoke with Reverend Simmons." Cordelia's hands stilled. "Oh. He's available on Saturday." Preston set down the basket and took her soil-stained hands in his. "Cordelia Larson, I know it hasn't been long in the counting of days, but in the measure of my heart, I've known you a lifetime. Will you marry me this Saturday and make us truly a family?" Tears sprang to Cordelia's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Preston gathered her close, kissing her with a tender passion that promised a lifetime of such moments. From the porch, William watched with solemn approval, his wooden horse held tightly in his hands. When they turned to include him in their embrace, his face split in a wide grin. "Does this mean I can call you Ma now?" he asked Cordelia. "If you'd like to," she replied softly. William nodded decisively. "I would, and I think my horse would too." They were married on Saturday in the small church in Redemption Springs, with Sheriff Cooper standing as Preston's best man and Martha Cooper as Cordelia's matron of honor. William served as ring bearer, his wooden horse tucked safely in his pocket for good luck. The town turned out in force, partly from curiosity, partly from genuine goodwill toward the couple whose courage had freed them from Blackwell's influence. Judge Parker, who had returned for Blackwell's trial, performed the ceremony in place of the ailing Reverend Simmons. "By the authority vested in me," he pronounced at the conclusion, "I now declare you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Preston kissed his bride to enthusiastic applause, and William threw his arms around both their legs, completing the circle of their family. That night, after William had been tucked into his bed with his wooden horse standing guard on the nightstand, Cordelia and Preston stood on the porch of their home, gazing at the stars scattered like diamonds across the Wyoming sky. "Are you happy, Mrs. James?" Preston asked, his arms encircling her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "More than I ever thought possible," Cordelia replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Are you, completely?" His voice rumbled against her. "Though I keep expecting to wake and find it's all been a dream, finding you, loving you, building this life together." Cordelia turned in his arms to face him. "Not a dream," she assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "A blessing, perhaps, but very real." Later, In the privacy of their bedroom, as moonlight spilled across the quilt, they came together as husband and wife, their bodies expressing what words could not: gratitude, devotion, a promise of forever sealed with each touch and whispered endearment. Spring arrived with its usual turbulence of late snows and sudden thaws, painting the land in vivid greens after the monochrome of winter. The James farm, as it was now known, had weathered the cold months well. The new barn had held strong against the blizzards, sheltering their growing collection of livestock. Cordelia stood in the dooryard, watching William chase a butterfly, his wooden horse forgotten momentarily on the porch steps. At 7, he was growing taller by the day, his face losing some of its babyish roundness. He had taken to school with enthusiasm, proudly bringing home his lessons to share with his parents each afternoon. Preston emerged from the barn, leading a magnificent black stallion, the first of what he hoped would become a successful breeding operation. Catching sight of Cordelia, he smiled and raised a hand in greeting. She returned the gesture, her other hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly, where their child, the doctor estimated a midsummer birth, grew steadily stronger each day. William abandoned his butterfly chase and ran to meet his father, chattering excitedly about his latest adventure. Preston listened with exaggerated interest, then scooped the boy onto the horse's back, leading him in a careful circuit of the yard. Cordelia watched them, her heart full to bursting. 3 years ago, she had been alone, fighting to hold onto this land against forces that seemed insurmountable. Now, she stood at the center of a thriving family, surrounded by love and possibility. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in amber and rose, William between them with his wooden horse prancing along the porch rail, Preston took Cordelia's hand and pressed it to his lips. "You ever think about that night?" he asked quietly. "When William broke his horse and you stayed up till dawn to make him a new one," Cordelia smiled, remembering. "Sometimes, it seems like another lifetime now." "It was the moment I began to love you," Preston confessed. "Watching you work by lamplight, your hands creating something beautiful from nothing, all for a child you barely knew." "I'm glad he broke it then," Cordelia said, her free hand caressing her rounded belly. "Though I'm sure he didn't think so at the time." William looked up from his play. "I have both now, though," he pointed out practically. "The one from Mama that Pa fixed and the one from you." He considered this. "Maybe the new baby will need a horse too." "I think that's an excellent idea," Preston agreed, ruffling his son's hair. "Perhaps you can help make it." As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing one by one above their home, Preston drew Cordelia close, his hand protective over their unborn child. "I never thought I'd find this again," he murmured. "After Mary died, I thought that part of my life was over." "And I never thought I'd find it at all," Cordelia replied. "Not out here, not after Samuel." "Then we're both blessed beyond measure," Preston said simply. Their life was not without challenges: drought years, harsh winters, the everyday struggles of carving civilization from wilderness. But the foundation they had built in those first frantic days of courage, sacrifice, and unexpected love carried them through each trial. In the years that followed, as their family grew and the ranch prospered, the story of how they met became family legend. The wooden horse, eventually joined by others as each child received their own, took pride of place on the mantle, a reminder of how a simple act of kindness in the darkest hour could spark a lifetime of love. And each year on the anniversary of that first night, Preston would present Cordelia with a small carving: a heart, a flower, a bird in flight whittled by his increasingly skilled hands. A remembrance of the woman who had stayed up all night to mend a child's broken heart, and in doing so, had healed his own.